Hi Lindsay, here's the feedback for your paper 2 mock exam that you did before Christmas. You've scored 3 out of 4 for this question 1. Unfortunately, you've put 5 answers and it's only asking you for 4, so you must only ever put the number that they've asked you for, because they will only mark the first 4 answers, and as it happens, B was wrong, and you C, D, F and H were right, but because they only marked the first 4, you're not getting the mark for H, so make sure you only answer the number of marks that they ask you for. And also be careful, because if it's asking you to shade, don't take you must do what they've asked you to do, although I have given you the 3 marks for this one. Moving on to question 2, where it asks you to summarise the differences between Eddie and Henry. You have given some good differences between Eddie and Henry and some good descriptions of them. You've said here that Eddie is laid back, likes to play his computer games and chatting on Skype with his friends. You've gone on to say that he scored 20 out of 25 or 80% on his English homework. I think it was actually his maths homework, but that doesn't matter. But what is that telling you about Eddie? What's it inferring? To me, it's inferring that despite the fact that he spends all his time playing games and talking to his friends, he does actually do very well in his homework. So he is able, and he doesn't really need to work at it. It seems to come naturally to him, whereas his dad, with all the benefits of his experience, only got 12 marks out of 15. And then you've gone on to describe Henry as a shy, scared person away at boarding school, which is very strict. Unfortunately, you've not used any quotes in this part to back up your the points that you're making about it, although you've said that he would rather work than remain at boarding school. It's imperative that you do put quotes in to back up your points and then explain why that has been used in particular. So you've gone on to say that Eddie's confident, but Henry is vulnerable and mistreated. Again, you needed to put the quotes in. You could have put the fact that he feels that he's treated more like a bear than a Christian, and they've described the bread and the beds and so on that's mentioned in the text there. So if we go and look at the mark scheme for this question, level 1 offers paraphrase rather than inference. You have included some inference. There is some simple reference and textual details, and there are statements of the differences. So if we have a look up at level 2, attempt some inference from 1. Yeah, again, you have given us some inference, some examples of what the text is suggesting to you. There is a bit of textual detail in there, but not too much, and it's only from one text. And then the statement. So I think we need to limit it at band 2. And because we've only got one actual quote from, sorry, we've got 2 quotes, haven't we, from source A, but none from source B. We'll have to stick at 3 out of 8 marks for this question. Moving on to question 3, where you're asked to analyse the language that Henry uses to try to influence his father. You've said here he uses lots of semicolons. That doesn't come under language, that's punctuation. But then you move on to the fact that he just doesn't want his father to mention anything. And you give the good quote there, so that it indicates the fear. So here, this is the inference here, this indicates the fear Henry has if his master was to find out. And then here's a good example where you said he uses similes to describe how his master is treating them, where he used more like bears than Christians. Again, we've got the inference here, this indicates that the children are being overworked and made to do everything, so that's a good point there. This next paragraph isn't really relevant because it's not analysing the language that Henry's used. And then we go into repetition of the bears. It's not personification, we've already said it's a simile. It's the wrong way round. You're not giving human qualities to the bears, you're giving bear-like qualities to the people. So, and again, that's just really repetition of the bit that you've said before where you've mentioned it's a simile. You could have said that he uses direct address, so he's using you and your to the father to try and draw him in and make him understand how bad Henry's feeling. He uses a lot of emotive language, such as I hope, my dear father, you will let me come home at Christmas, that we may once more meet again alive, if God permit me to live as long. So again, he's pulling on his dad's heartstrings, trying to let him come home. It's hyperbole. I would rather be obliged to work all my lifetime than remain here another year. So again, it's kind of over exaggeration. So he's trying to be very persuasive. There's repetition of my dear father throughout, where again he's trying to impress on his dad how dear his dad is to him. But I think this has been used purposefully because the fact that they've not met for 2 years would imply the opposite. So I think he's really trying to impress his father with how much he does care about him and wants to come home. If we look at the mark scheme for this question, for band 2, we've got attempts to comment on the effect of language. Yes, you do that. Some appropriate textual detail and some use of subject terminology, mainly appropriately. Yeah, I think most of it is. I mean, it's just personification that you have used incorrectly. So I think it needs to stay in band 2. So if we look up at band 3, it's a clear understanding, clear effect of the writer's choice of language and a range of relevant textual detail and accurate use of subject terminology. So I think it needs to stay in the band 2, and I think it's worth 5 out of 12 marks for that one. Had you added in some of the things that I've mentioned, then you would definitely have been in band 3, if not band 4. So well done. Moving on to question 4, where you're asked to compare how the two writers convey their different attitudes to parenting and education. You've understood the question and you've understood that you're looking at the way Jay, Eddie's dad, and William, Henry's dad, view education. And you've made some comments regarding Jay's attitude towards education. You said that you feel that Eddie's parents don't push him. You need to say here where you said he describes his time and results in school as my grades lined up like a line of Pac-Man. You need to say what that's suggesting to you about his grades and his attitude when he was at school. You go on to say that Eddie's dad makes a joke about doing homework and education, with the quote there, and this shows how relaxed Jay Rayner is towards looking at education. So that's covering Jay's perspective on it. You could have gone on and said that he seems to be proud of his son's achievements when he got 80% on the test, whereas Jay struggled to do it, which would give you more marks. And then you've gone on to look at Henry's attitudes towards education. You said he's strict, he's all for educational learning. You've said that he doesn't approve of the education system, given the quote there about they could both spell when they left home, but there's many spelling mistakes in Henry's letter. You go on to mention the fact that you feel that Henry's father has his best interest at heart and that he will bring them home if he feels they are being badly treated. However, it's his decision to send them to boarding school in the first place. And the fact that he doesn't trust what Henry's telling him, he has to write to somebody else to get more information, or feels that George would give a more truthful response, so he does have some suspicions about Henry's attitude to it. So if we look at the mark scheme for question 4, we can see that in band 2 it says attempts to compare ideas and perspectives. Well, you have attempted to compare them. I think you could have done a bit more on the perspectives and looking at the perspectives on parenting as well as education. And you have made some comment on how the writer's methods are used. You said that Jay is relaxed, and you gave the quotes where he's using humour, and the father of Henry is more strict, and the fact that he writes a letter back to the friend. You've used some quotes, but again I think some more quotes would have been useful and given you some higher marks, and you've identified some different ideas and perspectives. I think we'll limit it to level 2 because you needed to expand on your comparisons of the perspective with a bit more detail. But I think it's a good 7 out of 16 for this question. It's well done. So overall you've got 18 out of 40, which for your first attempt at these types of questions for paper 2 is a decent score. And bear in mind we've got 6 months now to improve your skills, so everything's still to play for. You're in a very good position, and let's just build on those skills and make sure that you're coming out with above the equivalent of a C grade, which is what you deserve. So well done.